Annahlyse Meyer, the Chief Communications Officer for the City of Norman. We're here with Dr. Carrie Evenson and Public Works Director Shawn O'Leary to talk with you about the Vision for Norman proposals. So, Shawn, the Vision for Norman, can you tell us a little bit about that and why we have these three propositions together?
You bet. Again, been developing for a long time, many years. They are transportation and stormwater infrastructure related. The transportation bond program comes out of several years ago in a comprehensive transportation plan that identified, particularly at this time, 19 different major transportation projects in Norman. And the stormwater propositions 2 and 3, which I know we'll talk about more here, were really more derived out of the last election in 2016 and the work of a stormwater citizen committee over the last couple of years.
That's great. So why are they on the same ballot?
Great question. We really think it's a vision for Norman. We really think it's all about infrastructure as a system, that we really thought breaking them apart or having them on different election dates would be more confusing. And in fact, it is a system approach. We're taking all of the infrastructure, transportation, and stormwater together and presenting that to our voters as a need throughout the city and for both types of systems at the same time.
Okay. So what are the 19 projects in Proposition 1? Is that the transportation bond, right?
You bet. So those, again, as I mentioned, come out of the comprehensive transportation plan. And that plan also had an enormous amount of citizen input. There was a 45-member citizen committee, lots of council input, of course, lots of public meetings over the course of 2 or 3 years. And, from that, they developed what were the needs, what were the transportation needs in Norman. The general theme of that program is that we need to move more to a multimodal system, meaning that it's not just about cars anymore or trucks. It's about pedestrians and bicycles and disabled paths of travel and so on and so forth. And so I think this set of projects addresses all of that. There are some of the basic projects. We're in growth areas where we just need to widen roads from 2-lane to 4-lane and so on. But there are also some really interesting streetscape enhancement projects in core Norman, downtown Norman, and so on. And those are unique in that they really are not adding lanes, they're adding features and again, trying to be multimodal, trying to serve bike lanes and better sidewalks and, again, more accessible paths.
I heard about a traffic management system. Can you talk a little bit
Bet.
about that?
Yeah, happy to. That's probably one of the more unique of the projects. It's not really a road project of any kind. It is a new concept in managing traffic. It's sort of right out of the movies. For some folks, they don't even know that cities do these, but they tend to be a very high-tech office atmosphere where technicians are watching in real time through video cameras and other technology what might be happening in our roadway system. This might be in an event, like a game day Saturday, where we're seeing congestion on Lindsay Street, or maybe there's an accident at an intersection. So rather than responding a little bit slower like we do now based upon our available resources, this would be a real-time observation of major corridors in Norman through a high-tech system of cameras and screens. And then those technicians would be dispatching help, whether it's maybe police officers or traffic technicians or whoever might be available to go address the congestion, address the traffic problems in a more efficient fashion.
So this would be more for traffic congestion than changing the timing of specific lights. So like if I was to pull up a light and sit there for a little bit, it wouldn't be some guy clicking a button to let me go.
Not
is that right?
quite there.
Okay.
But I would say a true traffic management center would have access to the timing sequences of traffic signals. So we hope someday, this is the direction of the technology, that someday those folks are trained to the extent that they literally could change the timing sequence on a corridor.
Okay.
And the technology will be there too. It's almost there today, frankly. Oklahoma City has one of these, Tulsa has one of these, Edmond has one of these. So this is the direction that cities are going. There's only so much we can do with the road systems and signals and so on. This is kind of that next generation of trying to deal with traffic congestion, which is a constant source of frustration for our citizens.
So in this proposition, it's a bond, right? So how does that affect taxes, or what can the average taxpayer expect to see from that?
You bet. Both of these bond issues are ad valorem or
Mhm.
property tax-based bond issues. And so in the case of the transportation bond issue, it is a no new tax
Mhm.
scenario. We were able to do that because previous bond issues are retiring or being paid off, if you will. And we're taking that capacity in the debt service and applying it to this new program. So if you vote for Proposition 1, you're voting to keep your property taxes where they are now, but for that you will get in return 19 really excellent transportation improvements. We're also matching our local dollars with federal dollars, and that's a really good use of those funds. In the case of the stormwater bond issue, we're not quite as fortunate. We don't have federal matching funds, and we've never done a stormwater bond program, so that will represent a tax increase of 5 mils on your property tax. Carrie can speak to the numbers, but we can give you some kind of breakdown per value of property, what that might amount to in a monthly payment.
Before we move on to the stormwater bond, I had a couple more questions. So if we don't invest, if this bond doesn't pass, what happens to that federal money? Would we still get to use it, or?
Yeah, great question, and that's one of the arguments I make all the time for doing this, and we've done this a number of times over the recent decades. By having those local funds, we are able to get more of the federal funds because we can match those grants. It's a matching program, usually an 80-20 matching program.
So we won't be able to just use straight federal funds for it?
Exactly, you can't.
Okay.
They want to see a local match. They want to see skin in the game, like any good grant program. And by having those matching funds up front, we've been very successful in getting those federal grants on literally an annual basis. Without the matching funds, you can never get started. And so that's one of the arguments we make. Not only the fact that it's a good use of our local dollars, but you've got to have the dollars to play the game in the grant program.
Great, thank you. So Carrie, I think you'll be able to answer some more of our stormwater questions, right? So this is our first stormwater bond. Why do we need it?
Well, because it is our first stormwater bond, really, because we haven't had the funding that we've needed to make the major improvements to stormwater infrastructure. The 2009 Stormwater Master Plan identified over 60 projects that needed to be done in the city of Norman to improve our infrastructure. And we've gotten, I think, 3 of those projects completed since that time, so not many. And really, we've gotten them completed because we have been able to include them with transportation projects that do have the ability to get some federal funding with them. So an example of the ones that we've completed or at least have in process, the Lindsay Street project, formerly known as Lake McGee, that was, as Shawn likes to call it, a stormwater project with a road on top of it. So we were able to incorporate it that way. And then the West Main Street Bridge over Brookhaven is another one of those projects that's a stormwater master plan project. So we still have lots of infrastructure projects that are waiting for the funding to be completed.
Why couldn't we include them in the transportation bond?
There are just some projects that, stormwater projects that don't tie well with the types of transportation projects that are included in the transportation bond. We do have one stormwater project that was identified in the master plan that is actually in the transportation bond because it's along with a special corridor on Lindsay Street from Pickard to Jenkins. So there will be street improvements as well as drainage improvements. We tackle 2 projects with one project on the transportation bond.
Shawn had mentioned that it's kind of a system. So how is transportation and stormwater a system that works together?
Well, with every road, you've got to have some kind of stormwater infrastructure with it. If you're living in the urban areas, you're going to see curb and gutter and storm inlets. Those are those grates that you'll see periodically along the street that take in our stormwater, because that stormwater runs off that hard surface of the roadway and it has to go somewhere. So it then goes into a network of pipes that go out into our creeks and streams without any treatment associated with it. And then if you live in the rural parts of Norman, where you may not see curb and gutter all the time, what you will see are roadside drainage ditches. Because again, we've got water flowing
Mhm.
from people's houses, from the roadway. That has to be transported somewhere so that it doesn't cause damage to our houses or our roadways.
Okay. So what kinds of projects are going to be done in this bond?
So there are a lot of different projects in this.
Okay.
There are 33 projects in the stormwater bond. So we're trying to do, to make a really big step towards
Mhm.
improving our infrastructure with the stormwater
Yeah,
bond.
that's half the projects.
Right, exactly. So it will be a phenomenal thing for Norman to have, to make those types of improvements to our stormwater infrastructure. Some of the types of projects that are in there are two basic types. There are the basic infrastructure improvement projects.
Mhm.
Those are going to be the capacity improvement, upsizing pipes and bridges and different types of structures, simply because the growth that has occurred around them, they haven't grown with the development around it.
So why would you need them to grow with the development around it?
Well, and to a degree, you're increasing some of the runoff,
Okay.
or you're extending the period of time that you're seeing that runoff, and they're just undersized and not able to handle the water that's now flowing through that system. And in some cases, it's just aging as well, and it just needs to be replaced. So there are those types of projects, and then there are the stream and channel improvement projects. They're the areas where these are the ones that are less likely to get funded with transportation because they're not really associated with the roadway. They're associated with our creeks and streams. And what we're seeing is as the flow regime, as the amount of water changes in these streams try to adjust with it. And in instances where we've built very close to the streams over time, not because anybody did anything wrong, but because this was just how we built, before we knew more about how water interacted with our urban environment. These streams now are adjusting, and as they adjust, they tend to deepen and widen, and that takes the stream banks with it and people's property and their backyards sometimes. And so we have to work on some of these stream stabilization projects. Imhoff Creek is a good example, south of Imhoff Road. Some of those properties are up to 20 feet above the stream bank, the bottom of the stream channel. So that's a pretty dramatic example of
That's
stream
scary
bank
to have that in
erosion.
your backyard.
It's definitely
Yeah.
a challenge, and I do hear from those neighbors after every big rain event. They want me to come out and see how their backyards have changed with that rain event because it will take additional soil with it. So these are the types of projects that we'll see with the stormwater bond, and it's not just in the urban areas, right? It's throughout Norman. There are at least 3 projects in every ward, so the entire community will see benefits to these projects.
And I know these projects were selected, it's part of the 66 projects that were outlined in the Stormwater Master Plan, but how did you choose these specific 33?
So when we were looking at these projects, the Stormwater Citizen Committee, it was a 16-member citizen committee. They met for over a year to look at the stormwater program and propose a funding package to solve our stormwater needs in Norman. The bond was part of that. And as they were looking through the projects that had been identified and some of the new ones that we'd added to the list over time, they really wanted us to make sure that we had at least 1 project in every ward. Like I said, we have 3. And they also wanted to look at to make sure that we were getting the highest priority projects accomplished with this bond package. So the master plan actually put a city priority rank to each of the projects so that we would know which ones were the most important to the city. We've completed the top priority one, that was Lake McGee on Lindsay Street. So then we've looked at the rest, and this list includes all of the top 12 priority projects, and then we were able to fit in others as well to get at least 3 in every ward.
What makes a project a top priority for the city?
It depends. There are a variety of factors that went into that priority score that's in the master plan. And if people are curious about that, they can go to the Stormwater Master Plan. It's on our website. And look at, there's a chart that's a prioritization chart, but it took in factors like potential loss of property, public safety impacts, and things like that.
Okay. So another question with that, I think people can pretty well understand, transportation. We all drive on roads. We all do that. So we can understand traffic. That's something we can all relate to pretty well. But how is a stormwater bond going to benefit the community as a whole? Like, what issues does that address?
Right, so that's the tough thing with stormwater infrastructure, because if it's working appropriately, people don't see it, right? Because it's taking the water away from our homes or our businesses or the roadway and moving it where it's supposed to go. But what we see when it's not functioning the way it should be is we often see a lot of flooding. And so some of the issues that we've seen, there's flooding along Imhoff Creek throughout downtown, sometimes makes it difficult to navigate around downtown because you can't cross Main Street when Imhoff is out of its banks near the Sprouts. So that's a challenge. And there are other places, there are some road closure places that, we regularly have to close because of high water. And so some of these projects will help address those problems.
Okay.
I think, if I may, public safety is something that we overlook in this regard. Carrie used a couple of good examples. We had talked for years about Lake McGee, that the flooding in that area on Lindsay Street was damaging properties and so on and so forth, and that was bad enough. But literally, we could not run an ambulance or a fire truck or a police car down one of our major arterial streets for hours, sometimes days. That's serious business if we can't provide public safety to our citizens because a road is flooded or a neighborhood is flooded. In the 2015 floods in Norman, we had 35 roads closed because of washouts caused by flooding damage. And so I think people don't think of it that way until, like Carrie said, we're in that crisis moment. Well, you never want to be in that crisis moment. We want to get out ahead of that and repair or replace these old pipes and so on, so we're not facing that condition when it happens.
Yeah. I think we all remember how bad 2015 floods were, and I'm sure we were all affected by it in some way.
Absolutely.
So that was Proposition 2, right? That's a stormwater bond. Now what's Proposition 3?
So Proposition 3 is a stormwater utility fee.
Okay.
It's different, but a companion to Proposition 2. Proposition 2, that funds our infrastructure improvements, but we can't fund personnel to maintain that infrastructure through a bond. So that's where the utility comes into play. It provides revenue that we need to improve our maintenance capabilities, to improve our water quality, and just to put some measures in place to aid our stormwater infrastructure.
So what does that utility look like?
So the utility, the Stormwater Citizen Committee developed a tiered rate in this one. The residential rate is 3 tiers based on the first floor living area. So it's your downstairs heated and cooled area of your house. It doesn't include porches, garages, outbuildings, any of those other types of impervious surface. It's simply your house.
Driveway.
No, it does not include your long driveway or any cattle trails or anything like that. It's just that downstairs square footage of your house for the residential property. And it's a $3, $6, and $9 tier based on that square footage. And if you wanted to see the breakdown for that, there are charts for both the residential and the non-residential rates on visionfornorman.com. So go there, check those out. You can definitely find that.
What's the non-residential rate?
The non-residential rate is a 4-tier system based on parcel size, so it'd be the acreage of that parcel. It's $12, $45, $80, and $160. So it ranges from $12 to $160 a month for the non-residential. Non-residential is commercial properties, businesses, industry, as well as residential properties that have more than 4 dwelling units on them. So multiplexes and apartment complexes would fall under the non-residential rate in this particular tier structure.
So if I'm renting an apartment, would I get the bill, or how would that work?
Right, so the way this is going to work is if this passes on April 2nd, then we're going to look to implement it, and the bill for the utility is going to go to the parcel owner in both the residential and non-residential aspects. So if you're renting either a single-family house or you're renting an apartment, it's going to be going to the property owner, and then it's up to them on how they pass that on.
And I know we have some credits available. Can you tell me a little bit more about those?
Yes, for the residential rate, there are 2 credits available. There's a 30% low income credit for those folks that currently qualify for water and wastewater credits. Same kind of process, an annual income verification needs to be submitted in order to qualify for that. And then there's a 30% agricultural credit for all properties that are zoned A1 or A2, and that's automatically applied. And in fact, we have a really interesting map on our Vision for Norman website, and it actually has, you can type in your address and search for it, click on it, and your rate will come up, and it actually has the agricultural credit figured into that. So you'll see what you would actually see on your utility bill for the stormwater fee.
So as we've kind of been talking about this with the public, we've gotten some on both sides that say these rates seem a little unfair, or businesses, some people say maybe they seem a little low, why aren't they higher? Some say they seem a little high, why aren't they lower? So how do we kind of come to where we're at on that?
Right, so the Stormwater Citizen Committee spent a lot of time talking about what was the best way to fund the stormwater program, but also in the best way for the city of Norman. We had a plan previously that wasn't really the right plan for Norman, so they took all of those factors into account, and they really viewed both the bond and the utility as a funding package. So while businesses may be capped at $160 a month for the utility, their property taxes will increase with that bond, and the bond rate isn't capped. It's basically as the property value goes up, the amount of taxes that they pay goes up accordingly. Okay. So it really is a package, and you really will see that those larger businesses in total pay what their impact is, or it's more equitable that way.
Okay. And that bond continues on, or will it go away? How's that work?
So the bond itself is, we're looking at getting all of the projects built within 10 years, but paying the bond off over 20 years. Okay. And then, if at the end we still have those other 30 projects that still need to be done, or there are more projects that need to be completed, and we've shown the city of Norman that we can really manage our money well and make significant improvements to our flooding, then we may come back and ask for some additional bond money, like we've done with transportation, to complete the rest of those projects. It would really be up to the citizens of Norman, though, to decide whether that happens or not.
Which is similar to our rate, because we're one of the only cities that can have to vote to raise utility rates. So if we wanted to come back and ask for more money, that would be up to the people, right? Right.
So any changes to the utility, once it passes, would have to be brought back to the city, to the citizens for approval.
So the utility will raise quite a bit of money. How do we know exactly what that's going to, and that it will go to that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that ensure that we're spending that money for stormwater purposes. One is that the revenue that's raised it will basically create an enterprise fund similar to what we have for water, wastewater, and sanitation, where that money can only be spent for stormwater related activities. So the revenue raised by the utility, along with any funds that are budgeted from the general fund to the stormwater program, both of those funds would go into that enterprise fund for stormwater and could only be spent on stormwater activities. The other aspect to this that helps to guarantee that we're spending the money appropriately for stormwater is that the citizen committee recommended that an oversight committee be formed to meet on a regular basis and review what we're spending those funds on and to make sure that we're following through with what we said we did. One other aspect, on visionfornorman.com, there is a budget laid out, both of our current budget and our proposed budget, so you can see where those costs are projected to go.
Okay. I mean, that's pretty reassuring, right? Sounds like you guys have really thought this through.
We spent a lot of time talking to the citizen committee, making plans and trying to make sure that we have all of the details, or at least as many of the details as we can, worked out before this goes to a vote of the people, so that they feel confident that we're moving in the right direction with this.
So I know that there's, maybe some neighborhoods that have their own stormwater infrastructure. Is there going to be anything in place to help them?
Yes, that's a great question. And a lot of people don't really realize that there are single property owners, neighborhoods that own stormwater infrastructure and are responsible for the maintenance of that infrastructure. Unless you live in a neighborhood that has that, you don't think about it. But I live in a neighborhood where that is the case, and so if we have to maintain our detention pond, it would be up to us to do it. And that can be difficult sometimes because we only raise so much with our dues. We often don't have enough to do major maintenance activities. And the Stormwater Citizen Committee really thought about that and recommended, and we've set up a neighborhood assistance program where it's a grant type program for neighborhoods, and they can apply for funding for infrastructure improvements for that private infrastructure that they own. It'd be a cost match program. We have a policy and an application completed. It's on visionfornorman.com. You can check that out and read the policy. And it's on the council agenda tonight. So hopefully it's approved and adopted, and it'll be a final policy as of tomorrow. So we've thought through these things, and we're trying to make sure that this is the right plan to benefit Norman citizens.
Great. So if I am not part of an HOA, can I still get my stormwater infrastructure paid for through this? Can I still get assistance?
Absolutely. That was one of the key measures to the neighborhood assistance program, is that it be there to be able to help anyone, any property owner that owns stormwater infrastructure, whether they're in an HOA or not. So it basically just requires that there's an agreement of the property owners around that structure, because property lines sometimes will dissect detention ponds, and you'll have 6 or 8 property owners that own that pond. So as long as they agree and are willing to participate in it, then that would be eligible for the program.
Okay. So you'd mentioned that this utility will go to pay for maintenance. Are we not currently doing maintenance, or what's that look like now?
Yeah, so we do maintenance right now, but it's very reactive. There's 190 square miles in the city of Norman, and that's a lot of infrastructure. Because if you think about it, like we talked about earlier, if you have a roadway, you have stormwater infrastructure in some form or fashion associated with it. So we have a lot of miles of pipe and stream channels, and we have thousands of inlets, all of those things that need to be maintained. Unfortunately, I only have 3 maintenance crews to do that. I have 4 street sweepers. I have an infrastructure crew that maintains the concrete hard infrastructure, and then I have a crew that maintains our open channels, and basically during the summer is mowing and weed eating and things like that to maintain our channels.
So it sounds like we kind of have one crew for the urban areas, one crew for the rural grassy areas, and That's a lot of land for those 2 crews to cover.
It is a lot of square miles to cover and not very many people to do it. And so right now, basically the way we manage maintenance is we're reactive. If we get a complaint of a sinkhole or we know of a problem area, then we're sending a crew out to fix it when a crew frees up to go fix it. And that may take several weeks to a month.
Well, that makes sense, because that's one of the comments we're getting is, I'm not seeing any stormwater improvements in my area, but it sounds like that's because you don't have the manpower to do it.
That's exactly it. We do not have the ability right now to be proactive like I'd like to be. The utilities department, when they're looking at improving water and wastewater lines, they've done a condition assessment of their pipes, and they know what areas are older and leaking and causing problems for them, and they can go in and schedule capital improvements for those particular areas. Right now with stormwater infrastructure, we know we have pipe in the ground that we probably haven't seen the inside of since it was installed. And we have pipe that's 100 years old. We've got clay pipe in the ground, and that hasn't been an approved material for a very long time.
Wow. So thank you guys for the summary of those propositions. Anything else you want to add to the plan or add to the discussion about Vision for Norman?
I just would encourage folks to get educated. We've got an enormous amount of material. A Vision for Norman website is outstanding. There should be no voters in Norman who go to the polls on April 2nd without at least knowing exactly what's there. And as Carrie mentioned, very precisely what you're going to get if you vote yes. If I vote yes for Proposition 1, I'm going to get these specific projects over the next 10 years. Proposition 2, these 33 projects over the next 10 years. And Proposition 3, although it's a little bit more complicated, we can tell you exactly where those dollars are going and the services that they'll be getting. So just really encourage people to get informed, watch the process over the next 30 days, and then get out and vote. It's for our community.
That's right. And if they have questions, need more information, then they can get here. I encourage them to go to Vision for Norman, look up our calendar of events, and come to an open house or a ward meeting and ask the questions directly. Shawn and I and our staff will be there to answer questions, and that's where you're going to get the best information. So come join us on those.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you all for joining us for this discussion about the Vision for Norman proposal, a practical and fiscally responsible funding solution to address Norman's aging infrastructure. You can learn more about these propositions as well as see videos, interactive maps on our website at visionfornorman.com. We encourage you, like Carrie said, to come to one of our open houses, talk with us. We would love to answer your questions. We don't want anybody to walk into the ballots on April 2nd unsure of what these proposals are. So reach out to us.